Şimdi arkadaşlar benim şu ana kadar geçen konuşmalardan çıkardığım aslında bu yazılım ve güvenlik arasında hani biraz sanal ve Orta Doğu adeta ortamı oluşmuş. Halbuki netice itibariyle karşılıklı konuşarak, anlaşarak ilerlenebilecek bir zemin var hayatta. İşte o zeminde bu zemin. Bugün burada hakikaten her şey konuşuluyor, paylaşılıyor. Şimdi efendim sırada bir panelimiz var. Yazılımcıya öncelik veren güvenliği irdeleyecek panelistler. Ki aslında böyle de olmalı değil mi? Yani hani mantık çerçevesinde yazılımcıya öncelik vermeli güvenlik. Onun o korunaklı şekilde gelişmesi, geliştirmesi için elinden geleni yapmalı. Efendim panelistlerimiz bu mevzunun anahtarları nasıl olabileceğini, nasıl olması gerektiğini arz edecekler ama onların bir moderatörü var. Öncelikle moderatörümüz sevgili Gökhan Say. Konuklar kimler? Yine alanının hakikaten usta isimleri. Efendim Kole Mastarji bir konuğumuz. Clint Gübler, Richard Greenberg ve Tanya Yanka bir diğer konuğumuz. Gökhan Say soracak, sohbet edecek. Ondan sonra sözü yönlendirecek. Arkadaşlar da bildiklerini paylaşacaklar.
Hey guys, welcome. It is great to have you in B-Shield. I am with the gurus of DevSecOps, of AppSec. You know, I just feel like to shut up and make you talk. That's it. That's how I feel at the moment. So I have so many questions. We want to learn from you. And again, welcome. Thank you for accepting my invitation.
Yeah, thanks for having us. Happy to be here.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
You made a great presentation. Tanya, you made a great presentation. Thank you for that. And thank you for again being with us in this panel. So I just want to start, guys. I can't wait to start. I want to start, but I'm going to start with the problems, unfortunately. We have so many questions and problems, but I know you have the answers. So, guys, just an open question. Let's define the problem first. So, what do you think about the largest problems and challenges of the application security world today? What do you think? And then we can work on them. Yes, Tanya, please.
I feel that there's sort of one problem and then it leads into a second problem, and both of them are just lack of education and awareness. So I feel like we're teaching people how to code and make software, and we're not teaching them how to make secure software. And then they get out into industry, and then training is quite a lot. And there's all sorts of different training, and not everyone's agreeing on what are the best things to do. And so I feel like, you know, we're teaching everyone how to make software, but not teaching them how to ensure the software they're creating is secure. And so, you know, we're flooding the gates and the entire industry with programmers who can build lots of stuff, but they're not sure if it's secure or not. And then as they get older and they do more stuff, they're like, gosh, I have a problem, but I don't know exactly where to go or how to fix this problem. This is where I see, I personally, am I very biased? I run a training company, opinion of, so like it's clear bias, but yeah.
Yeah, I have to agree with that. When I speak to developers, almost every single one of them want to write secure code. They just weren't trained that way. The curriculums in the universities and the colleges don't include security other than just touching on it tangentially sometimes. And so, you know, they can do some great coding tricks. But there's some basic stuff that they should know and they could be easily taught. I mean, they're still using insecure libraries like they're going out of style. And that's just crazy. I mean, and that's got nothing to do with coding, right? So there's a whole bevy of things that good security training can do to help with the developers.
I agree with Tanya and Rich on this front. I'm also going to add in the human element on top of that, which is burnout. Especially this year, we've seen a huge increase in burnout rates because of the emotional burnout from COVID-19, and the whole world seems like it's on fire if you're in the US. And so that also does play a role too, is that we're not just robots or machines, we're actually human beings that have emotions and feelings. And so with burnout, it leads us to having more breaches, but also it leads us to having issues when it comes to communication and misinformation across departments, which is one of the big things for security folks, is to make sure we have proper communication across channels, but also making sure it's not misinterpreted, because then that becomes a misinformation suddenly.
Quinn, my friend, any addition, or you agree with them all?
Yeah, agree. I guess another thing I would add, I do agree with what's been said, but I think in addition to developers not necessarily having the right training, there's also from the reverse side, I think many AppSec engineers don't necessarily have a foundation in development, so it can be difficult for them to have empathy with developers, and they may not sort of understand some of the trade-offs and challenges in terms of like shipping quality code quickly, and also just being able to leap in and help fix bugs themselves. So I think some additional education on both sides could be useful.
Yeah, there's often two strong camps, and it's to find the people that have that background in both is very difficult. And you need that communication. You need a good security engineer to have a background in programming to know that when they give a report to a developer, say, here, fix this, that they didn't review it first and say, well, no, this doesn't apply, this doesn't apply, this doesn't apply. And you know, they're losing the confidence of the developers when they do stuff like that, as an example.
So we can't build secure software. We know that it's in the pocket, unfortunately. And you say that it is about training. One, it is important. Second, we are burned out. I mean, developers are burned out because the world asks fast and fast and fast. We require innovation in one side. So on the other side, you say there is not enough empathy from the teams and they can't engage. So that is a very important question. You know, development teams, developers and security teams, they can't engage, right, guys? So why is it so hard for them to engage?
They're speaking a different language, as we stated, right? The security engineers understand security, and developers can, you know, write great code, and you know, to find someone who can do both, there's your challenge. So it could be done. You know, I've hired security engineers for my team, and I've specifically looked for people who knew how to code, even though it wasn't in the job spec initially, because I said, I need that person to go over and find the champions in the developer side, the security champion, if you will, the people that really care and want to learn, and put those people together, and they can, yeah, they can be a strong unit. Absolutely, Tanya. Well done.
I hope I didn't scare everyone with my gigantic COVID muscles. I also feel it's like a management issue sometimes. Like I will see places where they say security is really important, but then they won't hire any staff for it, and they won't buy them any tools that they need, and they won't add any time to the project schedule. And then they're like, I don't understand why the code's not secure. You know, we hired this pen tester. And I'm like, yeah, you hired that person to come in. They didn't really interact with the developers. Then they sent this big long report. You gave them no time to fix anything. And then you wonder why the developers think the security team is not fun. It's like some stranger comes in and it's like, you guys totally suck. Here's my report. And then, you know what I mean? And I remember telling a project manager, well, if you want a code review to happen, like, can we put like a sprint of time for the code review to happen? And they looked at me like I was an alien. They're like, well, just, I'm like, what? Like when you go to the grocery store and then you have to go to 2 other stores, or you're like, oh, but I'll just do them at the same time. Is that possible for you to be in the grocery store and the shoe store? And they're like, no. I'm like, why do you think they can like get the results of a code review and fix all of that? Well, they're also building these 3 new features in that same sprint. Like when you explain it to them, they're like, oh, that makes sense. But then they build this schedule and you're like, I don't see any security activities in here. And so if management's letting that happen, like they can say security is important, but they have to like do the actions to show that it's actually important.
Yeah, the trickle down effect, actually, I hate using that term because I think of Reagan economics, but in reality of it is that even the C-level still, you have CISOs that are pushing for, you know, more funding to invest in their security team. But there's still this sense of apathy towards security. I mean, overall, in general, we tend to spend more on sales and marketing, and we totally forget that security plays a huge role. You wouldn't have a product without security. And so that's one of the issues that we're constantly are dealing with on that front. And then to the point also, I just have to admit, empathy is definitely one of those things where we still are missing that part in organizations. For example, like Clint mentioned, like not too many people have the knowledge of what it's like to be a developer, and not too many have a knowledge of what it's like to be a security person. But I think we can all understand that when we were little, you know, when we turn in our paper for English, and let's be real, many of us weren't good at English at some point. That's why we're in this field. But let's just say when you would get that paper back, it'd be all striped out with red all over it, right? That's how developers feel with security people. We just basically, they're like, this is my beautiful creation. And then we take that and then we rip it to shreds and give it back like, now it's better. Now this is safer. It's like, but you took out some of the
Your
beauty
baby's
content.
ugly.
Yeah, it's the ugly baby thing. I try to like refrain from using the baby ugly like example, but it's basically like that. So we need better empathy. We need our management to practice better empathy, but we also need the C-levels and the boards to try to reduce the apathy towards security, because that is a huge deal right now. We've seen an increase this year by 400% of breaches because of phishing attacks, because they're going after people that are not on security teams. And that just lets you know there's apathy right now, definitely out there on security.
You know, guys, I had the chance of interviewing Kostas Markides, a strategy professor from London Business School today. And I was asking these questions, similar questions, and he said, Gökhan, all the problems in a company, 70% are coming from the leaders not setting the right environment for their teams, you know, not the right systems, incentives, culture, shared vision and purpose. So if the teams don't have that, then there will always be conflict. If they have conflicting incentives, then you will face that. So this is normal, right? And I talked to many developers also today, and I asked them, do you really have security as a success criteria? They said no. So it is so obvious, right? Why we are here.
Yeah, there's got to be a multi-pronged approach where you have upper management supporting security, where you have upper management engaging with, hopefully you have a project management office. So when a project comes to the forefront in conceptual step, right? Hey, I just want to build something, but I haven't worked the details out. At that very moment, security needs to be involved, right? Don't wait until down the road, right? Security needs to know what you're planning, right? What the goal is. You know, is this going to be an application? Is it going to be hosted on the internet? Is it going to be company users, or is it going to be external users, or both? You know, what's going to be the platform? Early stuff, you have a vague idea of what you want, and so that can help the security team prepare, right? And so you want upper management to support security. You want security to be engaged with the project management team. You want security to be obviously involved with the application development team. And a lot of this comes on the shoulders of the CISO or the head of security to actually reach across the aisle to these different business units and engage with them and try to build relationships. That's key, right? I mean, you can have upper management pushing it down, but you know, that'll just be the support. That won't necessarily, you know, make sure it works correctly. You need a strong security leader who understands that relationships are as important as any technical thing you could possibly dream up.
So again, through the interview that I had today, one of the developers said that the security teams, they should stop acting as policemen, as the gatekeepers, you know, I mean, so it is the blockers thing, right? Unfortunately, how can we not be the blockers, but the enablers? How can we make that happen, guys? This is $1 million question, but yeah, you have the answer, I'm sure.
Have open conversations. It's going to be awkward, but you got to have all the people in the room and be like, this is my objectives. these are your objectives. How are we going to meet there? Here are everyone's responses. Also have anonymous submission where if you need to tell someone about this team or this problem is happening across that team because this person is doing this. People need to know if you're being gatekeeped in your projects. And that's one of the things is that we can facilitate better communication across departments and teams. We just have to be okay with being criticized at times, but it's good criticize in a sense. But I think having better communication is definitely one of those tools, making sure you're on one place for communication, because we still see where people in different departments using different tools for communication, and yet no one is on the same portal, which is unfortunate to still see today. But I think that's really important, is to have those communications.
Totally agree. Clint,
you know you want to talk about this. I feel like the engines are racing and everything. I'm just like waiting for Clint to explode.
I'll try not to, but I can't promise. Yeah, I totally agree with Chloe that I think communication is critically important. Another way to look at it that I think a couple of companies are doing, which is very interesting, is basically having the AppSec or security teams consider developers or engineers as their customers. So similarly, when we are building products for our users, we make sure they have a good UI, a good user experience, and we do all these things to make sure it's a good experience, right? And I think similarly, some modern forward-thinking security teams are making sure that, say, internal security tooling or the process developers have to go through to either ingest or fix bugs, and basically all the things developers have to do, like how can we make that low friction? Like rather than having them log into a separate portal to find a tool, a security issue found, instead like have it inline on a pull request instead of giving them a big PDF of a bunch of vulnerabilities that they have to then sift through. Instead, maybe create like a GitHub issue or a Jira issue. Basically, like how can we reduce friction as much as possible so that it's easy to do the right thing, both in terms of like ingesting vulnerabilities, as well as like how can we prevent those vulnerabilities from happening in the first place? Like if there's something very difficult or technically complex to do in a secure way, let's just like make that never happen in the first place by giving developers, say, libraries or internal services that just make classes of vulnerabilities not even possible in the first place. So there's been a lot of companies who've written great things about this. Microsoft, Facebook, Google, Netflix, Slack, Dropbox. There's been a bunch of companies who I can link to various blog posts and papers and other things they've written. But basically, one thing that I think is very promising is like, how can the security team enable developers to do something both quickly and securely? Like, can we just sort of like pave the road for them such that like they don't even have to be aware of security? They can just transparently get their job done effectively and quickly and just never have to talk to security except in very sort of like edge cases. But yeah, basically like make the secure thing super easy, keep developer user experience in mind, and that's what I see a number of companies doing effectively. So I can chat about any of those in more detail, but that's sort of the main idea.
Clint, I have a question. Sorry.
ahead.
My quick question is, have you ever seen companies basically do an internal CTF to invite the developers and security folks to be part of it, just to see what it would be like for them all together as a fun practice of all, and you do teams and whatnot and mix up the security and dev together? I don't know if you've ever experienced that and if that works pretty well.
Totally. Yeah, so developers love CTFs. A bunch of security engineer friends of mine at different companies have said like that's one of the best engaging things they've done. I think Leaf from Segment gave a great talk a couple of years ago about basically when new Segment developers are onboarded, they have like a mini 1 or 2 day CTF where they actually take previous vulnerabilities discovered in Segment's bug bounty program and basically like extracted them into like a mini CTF. So basically developers got to try to find vulnerabilities that are using the same languages and tech stack and even the own internal services that Segment uses. So basically it's like, here's real things we've happened in the past, like here's an example SQL injection or cross-site scripting and so forth. And then they had like an internal leaderboard. And I think like some of the founders got involved and it was like very competitive to see who could find the most stuff. But yeah, I think it takes a bit of work, of course, to set this up. But yeah, I think having CTFs where both the security team is sort of like helping out, but maybe also just sort of letting developers run free a little bit yeah, I think it's much more compelling to be like, oh, this is my code base and my tech stack, and here's what actually could happen, rather than this sort of like theoretical like alert box that like, how does that hurt me? Like, I can just type that into my console. Like, who cares? But yeah, totally. I think CTFs are great.
So, my friend, you said we need to help more to developers pave the road, and as security people, we are great in breaking things, but are we as good as in fixing them? I don't know. I'm not sure with that, but you know, are we really helping the developers enough? What do you think, guys?
Depends on where you work. And it depends on how many
Political
AppSec
answer,
people
Tanya. Okay,
you have.
continue with that.
I feel like it depends too on how much leeway you're given. Like when Clint was talking about making a paved road, he means, you know, like, let's not have a big roadblock instead, where you have to hop through these 20 security hoops, or you do not get to pass go, you do not get to collect $200. Instead, you make the easiest way to do the thing, the most secure way to do the thing. And so you support them. And Clint's talked about before, because I've watched all of Clint's talks. I'm a fan. And so,
I agree.
and I also read his newsletter. But anyway, basically, like, you can create security wrappers, which he'll tell you more about. You can write your own libraries to support your teams. You can buy tools. You can sit down and fix bugs with them if you actually think that that is the most effective way. Like, I'm friends with the team from Shopify. I have a bunch of friends on that team. And they tell me, like, once in a blue moon, we find a bug. And like, I'm right there in the code already. And it's like, oh, screw it, I'll just fix it. Right? Like, if you have it open and you've gotten so deep down into it that you're like literally already in the compiler, it's like, well. And so I think it really depends on the team. But if, like Clint said, you focus on enabling them, I've also seen some people call this self-service. So I, as a nerd, I don't want to wait on anyone. I always want to do everything myself. So like, if I have to make a ticket and then sit on my hands and wait, I literally will make a ticket. Like when I was in the Canadian government, we use Blackberries. I'm Canadian, that's my accent. And I'd be like typing out the ticket as I would walk to the person's desk, and I'd be bringing cookies for bribery. I'm like, no, I want my stuff done now. Right? And so if we make it so that they can run the scanner themselves, or they could do the things themselves, or there's this pipeline, they can run it through it. And then if they pass, they get to do the thing they want, like not having to involve us whenever possible, but knowing we're available if they need us. Like that, it's a hard balance to do, but if you do it, you usually have like much happier devs and more secure software, I would think.
Yeah, I mean, a good relationship is key, as I mentioned earlier. And, you know, when you have, for example, if you're doing a dynamic vulnerability scan, you don't take the report and hand it off. You sit and evaluate it, and then you sit with the team, with the development team, and say, okay, let's review this. We can throw these out there, false positives, or these don't apply to us in our case because we have compensating controls, or this application isn't using this, it's just a bad report. But the rest of these things, you know, let's talk about how we can solve this, right? So now they know they have security as their enabler, their teammates, as opposed to, you know, if you think back, how did security get this reputation? I'll put forth my belief that it came about because security was an afterthought, and people would tell security, oh, this is going live tomorrow, just take a look at it and sign off. That's how we became the bad guys, because we would say, what? I can't review this in 2 hours. And so that's how it started. We became the stop. But in today's world, you'll be hard pressed to find a security team that doesn't get some notice. Do they get enough? It depends on the company, but they'll have some notice. And I always stated that I told my team, never say no. I don't want to hear that word come out of your mouth. Figure out how to give the client, and everyone's a client for security, how to give the client what they need. If it means we got to roll up our sleeves a little bit and do a little bit of research to help because they don't know what the solution will be, then let's do it, right? And so we just need to show that we care and that we're part of whatever team is approaching, whatever business unit wants to do something.
So, yeah, Clint, are you gonna make a comment, my friend?
To do a quick +1 of a couple of things Tanya said. One, don't underestimate the power of cookies and desserts. They are very powerful for building connections. So totally, didn't want that to slip by. Is very powerful. And then the other is self-service security, I think is a very powerful idea. So I think it has at least two benefits, probably more. So one is when people can do something themselves, you are unblocking them, and you're also making them feel empowered and have ownership over something, right? Like, so if you're like, oh, I can't fix this myself, I need to wait for someone else, that's very like disempowering. So it like slows the process down and also makes people, I think, have a less of a sense of ownership over it. And then the other is ultimately every security team is very time and person limited. So the more you can have people do security without talking to you and then just have you assist with the one-off more complicated things, then the more impact you can have as a security team with fewer people. So yeah, that was just everything Tanya said, but I wanted to give it some more plus ones.
Great. So, you know, SQL injection is 21 years old, guys, but I don't want to be negative, you know. I mean, so what are we learning from our mistakes? Are we improving both the developers and the security compared to the just in the last couple of years? Are there things also going better?
We're still seeing a lot of the same vulnerabilities reoccurring and reoccurring. We like to think that people are getting smarter and we're having an effect, but you know, humans write the code and humans can break the code, and humans are fallible. It's about process. If you've got a good process, which will not allow you to build your own SQL server and not patch it, for example, then you know, you can avoid a lot of the problems. You know, patching is probably going to cover 80% of the vulnerabilities out there. But people don't do it, and it's a basic thing, right? And so, you know, this process needs to be put in place. You can't do anything just on your own. You've got to do it according to change management and process in your company. That will help quite a bit.
I'm going to disagree with Richard.
Finally!
Finally,
I feel like some things have improved. So for instance, cross-site request forgery used to happen a lot. And then they put it on the OWASP top 10, and Richard and I'm sure, I know Chloe and Clint like OWASP too, but Richard and I are in love with OWASP. And I mean, he's on the board, right? And so like they put it on the top 10, publicized it, went on and on about it. And then a whole bunch of the people that write the programming language frameworks programmed protections into it. So quite often I talk about pushing left or shifting security left, like starting it earlier. If we make it so the programmers can't even make this mistake if they want to, like that's the best, right? And so we've seen some things like that happen. So for instance, in .NET, there's more protections now for injection types of things. And if you use parameterized queries, which we're all supposed to use, that protects it too. But I do agree, I do keep seeing a lot of the same things, like cross-site scripting. It's like, we're in love with it. We just keep doing it all the time. It's everywhere. And it's a thing I would love to see obliterated at some point. But I think that partially we have to work with the people that create the browsers for web apps. And partially we have to work with the people that create the frameworks. And then we actually have to teach secure software in schools. I think it's so criminal that like we teach them hello world and we literally teach them how to do cross-site scripting. We're like, here's how to put something to the screen. Awesome. Now let's get input from the user. Let's not validate it. I'm sure it's totally fine and we can trust our users. They put in the cross-site scripting and they're like, now let's output it without any protections. XSS, best recipe ever. And it's like, I call it hello insecure world. And I'm just like, and so I feel like maybe some governing body needs to be in charge to be like, you can't just keep teaching people how to do things insecurely. It's not allowed anymore. Like when people go to trade school, they're not like, hey, engineers, remember when that giant bridge fell down and then we all like wore the ring and all this? Like, man, we're fine with that now, as long as most of the bridges don't fall down. Right? And then we'll blame the construction crews. I feel like maybe the governments around the world are going to need to get involved and like push for this, says a person who used to work for the Canadian government. I don't know how else we can do it. Do the rest of you have an idea of like how we could enforce change? Like, they're like, go away, Tanya.
Instruction. No, I think instruction is definitely one of that. The other thing is VCs. I know it sounds really weird that I just want VC right there, but in reality of it is that for the longest time, VCs never even took in consideration security when evaluating a product. That itself tells you that there's an issue. And I mean, growing up in the Bay Area and being in tech and whatnot, still security is something that's not a huge thing to consider. You're still apathy, and we have reasons for that. It's just that we're not teaching security. I mean, I'll even give you an even bigger picture thing. In poli-sci, for the longest time, they never taught cybersecurity because they didn't think cybersecurity was ever a threat. So if you think about that, that's letting you know we still have a huge problem when it comes to apathy, and we can start teaching about security at a younger age is going to be better, but also we need our current organizations to notice and appreciate that security, it is the heart of your product at the end of the day. With vulnerabilities and whatnot, you're asking for something to happen, and you don't want to lose the trust of your consumers, of course. So it's definitely still an issue, I think, is that we still are dealing with apathy today.
So we are trying to embed security to early stages of software development. We are trying to shift left, and even with that, they are saying shift left, not only shift left, shift everywhere. So I have a bigger question. It's not about shifting left. It is not about embedding in the early stages. What the world asks from us is to be fast and safe at the same time. Can we achieve that?
Well, we've already talked about that during my session.
Exactly.
So I'll let the others speak first. I always like hearing what they have to say.
$1 million question. Send me the bank accounts. I'm waiting for the answers.
DevOps has been here for a while, and we've got to get it to DevSecOps, and automation, I think, is really important. The more, and who was it, Clint or Tanya said it earlier, that we want to just have development do as much as possible without security involvement. And if we can automate, that will help quite a bit, because on many fronts, right? It removes security from the picture, at least for a little bit. It allows things to move more quickly. It removes roadblocks, and it empowers your developers. Once they're empowered, they'll feel, even better about their code and their process than before. So I think that's an admirable goal. We're working towards it. I'd like to see more of that, of course.
I can't help myself. So I feel you definitely can have speed and quality, and by that I mean security, but you have to prepare for it and get ready. So for instance, you can't just like put things in a pipeline and be like, everything's fine now, right? So if we want to have a super fast pipeline, you actually end up having to work a lot harder on it to make it have good results and make sure that it's fast. So a couple a couple newer ideas that I've seen, for instance, so I used to put a DAST tool in my pipeline. I knew it would take, however long to run, and I just kind of sit there and I'd go get a cup of caffeine, etc. But then I figured out, so one of my clients was doing this, and I'm like, you're a brilliant genius. Why did you hire me? And so what they did is they would scan everything continuously, and then they just have this little API. And so they'll verify the results and then put it in the API regularly. And so whatever the very last scan was that was verified, it's just basically pass or fail. And as soon as they verified the results, they've cut all the tickets into the bug tracker. And another one of my clients came up with this like Insta threat modeling. And so we have 5 questions, and I can only tell you 3 of them. And it's in a JSON file in every single app. And so when it's running through the pipeline, it just checks the answers, and then it passes or fails based on the threat model. So is it, a mission critical app, or is it not one of those 5? Is it internal or is it external? Is it containing sensitive information or not? And the other two questions are just for them. But the point is then it looks at that and then it's like, oh, it's a high fail, or like, oh, it comes in at a medium, but it's okay. It's internal facing. There's no sensitive information in it. It's not mission critical. And so they end up like threat modeling each one of their tools along the way, but that took time. That didn't just happen overnight. And so their pipeline is significantly faster now, and they're not trying to change each pipeline anymore. All of them are set to the same thing, and they just check this file, and they have to update the file with each new like major release, basically. But like those things take time. And so if we invest in DevOps, they talk about the 3 ways of DevOps, and the third way is called continuous learning and taking time to improve your daily work. And I think sometimes security, we're running around and we're putting out fires and we're responding to incidents, and we forget like that if we invest in ourselves, like the security team's results, that then we can be fast and we can be high quality, but we can't just be on fire all the time, which I've told many a boss before. I can't respond to incidents 3 out of every 4 weeks, and then you expect me to make progress on my projects.
I would definitely say continuous learning is one of those things, like whenever people ask, so if I only have this amount of money to budget into my team, I'd be like, invest in learning. Because at the end of the day, that's how you help your team excel, but also it shows that you care about them. I think when employees are feeling recognized and they're appreciated, it makes them want to work longer hours because they love what they do and they love where they work. And so investing in continuous education is really important. And I am definitely one of those people that pushes for gamification, like CTFs. And to Clint on that question of the CTF, because CTFs can bring empathy. And I think that's one of the things is that we're still dealing with, 2 different teams that don't really want to work together, but they know they have to work together. And so I think the best way is to have a better idea of how each one's doing their job, to have a better idea of what it's like to be in their shoes.
I feel like Chloe was really subtly trying to say that everyone ever should sign up for Clint's newsletter. Too long didn't read sec. I feel like that's what she was saying, and it was like subtitled, but no one could see it.
You know what? What is that website again? Like, I think that's something, I think that's an important thing to add in here. Clint, what is your website?
The text in the mail, don't worry.
I think everyone's going to think I like paid you to reference it.
No, but it's so good.
Yeah, so it's TLDR sec for like security, but yeah, TLDRSEC.com. And yeah, I can post a link to it, but yeah, I wasn't going to mention it, but yeah, it's basically just I spend an inordinate amount of time reading various security things from people who are super smart and trying to sort of distill down the things that I think are most useful into sort of one place, ideally just to save people time.
Exactly. We can learn a lot from that. Guys, still, I'm trying to understand if we are improving, if we are on the right path, if we are learning from our mistakes. I know that companies are really trying a lot, but maybe they're also wasting a lot of time. Are there any things that companies are doing, but still you think it is just a waste of time? I mean, just on the wrong path. What are they? Are there any?
Trying to identify every single vulnerability and trying to address every single vulnerability, which a lot of companies do, without a really careful risk assessment of the results, you're wasting a ton of time trying to fix things that might never, ever be compromised. And so you have to understand what the reality is out there. You know, threat modeling is key to get a better understanding of that. And so that's my 2 cents on that.
Yeah.
Jokan, I want to disagree with you. So I want to take the potentially controversial opinion in security that I think things are getting better over time. So like flashback to say early 2000s and think of web security in like 2002 or something. Basically like SQL injection in every login form, every field was like cross-site scriptable, like literally like dumpster fire. Like if you were a pen tester, it was sort of the glory days where you like, you know, you fly in and in 2 days you're just like criticals, like everybody gets 7 of them. And I think that as frameworks have gotten better to, I think Tanya, Chloe, and Richard's earlier points, like handling cross-site scripting, say in like React by default, like many web frameworks templating language, output encodes by default. CSRF is often handled. Object relational mappers or ORMs are sort of killing SQL injection, at least when used properly. I think overall, if you're using a modern tech stack and you're using it appropriately, you're actually helped, or you're prevented from many classes of vulnerabilities. Now that doesn't prevent, say, business logic flaws and other things that are unique to your application. Like obviously frameworks aren't aware of those. But I would say overall things are getting better.
Yeah,
I think you had other questions that I didn't address, but I do want to say that I think certainly there's a lot that we still have to go, but I think many broad swaths of attacks are less common now due to like browsers and frameworks getting better.
So, yeah, I want to just make a quick comment. I'll give you that, right? People are practicing more sanitary security, if you will, and things are improving. But on this side, right, the black hat hacker community is working, without sleep because it's a multi-billion-dollar business, and it's an arms race, right? So we have to get better. But overall, are we in better shape than we were in the days that you were referring to? I don't know the answer to that because we're seeing breaches left and right. Now, a lot of them are not coming in through layer 7, but still a fair amount are. So I don't have a good answer, but I know that we've got to keep up doing what we're doing. We are making great inroads, but so are they, right?
I would.
There you go.
I was just gonna say, I think the whole thing is that we're seeing more investing in our security teams and well-being. I think COVID-19 has definitely pushed that forward, where they've realized we need to upskill our team. We need to invest in them and their own well-being and their health. And they understand that mental health does play a huge role when it comes to us applying and doing our work. It used to be like if I went and told a boss a year ago, hey, I'm dealing with an anxiety situation, they'd be like, okay, but you can still do this project. And the thing is that it's different now, because now they realize, oh no, mental health does play a huge role on our team, because burnout is really apparent right now. And I think that's the one thing, is that the one good thing out of this year, I would say, is that employers are starting to recognize that part. And I think that's one of the things that even in security, we've been having ongoing problems with burnout, because we work all hours. Like there's a lot of different jobs you can have, but when you're in security, it's all hours. You're expected all hours. If someone called you at 2 a.m. and there's something happening, you're on your computer, you're doing it. And you don't really find that in other fields. So that's why burnout is very real. And I think it's time that we start addressing it. And I'm glad that this year is bringing to the forefront.
So unfortunately, time is flying. And my last question, guys, I'm so sorry for that. But what is next? What is going to be the evolution of secure coding in the next 5-10 years? Are we going to celebrate the 30th birthday of SQL injection? What is going to happen?
I would guess that as more places move to DevOps and more places start using pipelines, that we will have better application security tools for pipelines. Right now, I see some companies putting old school tools into a pipeline, and they're like, our SAST tool only runs 45 minutes. It's not that bad. And I'm like, unacceptable. Not that a SaaS tool isn't useful, it just doesn't belong in a pipeline necessarily. And so I think that as people learn more about DevOps, more shops start to adopt that. Like a lot of companies, what I see is they still have old legacy apps and they waterfall that, but they're new apps they're putting through pipelines. I feel like we will see a whole bunch of more modern apps and more modern AppSec tools, which will be awesome. However, I still unfortunately see some places where they're just not even looking at their legacy at all. They're just like, I don't know if you've ever seen someone clean their house where they just take all of the stuff and like put it in a closet and then just like put something in front of the closet so it can't open, and then they're like clean. And I feel some places are doing that. So I'm hoping that even if they just do the smallest amount to make their legacy applications just not total dumpster fires, that will be an improvement. And again, like just so much cooler, better tools coming out and people modernizing the way that they do their IT and therefore security as well.
I love your positivity.
Yeah, I think there'll be less individual coding and more just assembling pre-made packages of routines and codes, which by definition should be safer, right? If those packages have been examined thoroughly enough by an open community, if you will. So that's something that I was hoping for. And then your point about legacy apps, they never seem to all go away. I mean, we're talking 5 years. We could be hopeful. Maybe they'll all die out, but there probably will still be a few hanger-oners.
A couple of things. Oh, Chloe, you go.
You go for it. You go for it. Go for it.
Yep.
Dang it. Okay, fine. I would just say that I hope in the future that there is, I think just in general, I wish society would have a better idea of security and be able to take our advice as security specialists of why these things need to happen and why they need to be fixed, and to reduce the apathy, because I feel like that takes more of my energy and time than anything, is to explain to someone why they should listen to me. And instead of having like this ego battle because they read some blog post and it's supposed to be this way, and it's so frustrating. So I just really hope there's this reduction of apathy, better empathy across teams, and doing like activities together. I think is definitely one of those things that I do see in the future, but I think things are getting better, and I'm hoping they stay like that.
Perfect.
Because you never know. With 2020, everything's up in the air. No one knows anything anymore.
Yes, Clint.
I think frameworks and libraries are going to be more cognizant of being secure by default. I think that many services and tools will be built that make developers both faster and more secure. So I think that will help raise the security bar overall. Browsers are also implementing some interesting things, like the same site cookie flag, for example, for preventing cross-site request forgery. Yeah, I think there will be a de-emphasis on AppSec teams focusing on vulnerability identification, like finding bugs, and more of an emphasis on being like partners to security teams. So like, how can we maybe even sit next to them side by side and advise building features, or like, you know, just taking more of like a customer-centric view. Yeah, so I think libraries and frameworks, more security, security teams focusing more on building is what I'm seeing, and I hope to see more of.
That's a brave new world.
It's a bit different than the past.
That is going to be perfect to end with. That's a brave new world. Hey guys, it was really great to talk to you. I wish we had more time, hours, but let's do this for another time. I loved it. Thank you very much. I learned a lot from you. I'm sure everybody learned a lot from you. Thank you.
Thank you.
You.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you. Thank you.
Awesome.